www.WRNE980.com. It's time now for You Got the Power with your host, Omar Neal.
Well, thank you, Bob, and welcome again to the You Got the Power show. I am your host, Omar Neal. Well, we never thought that we would be engaged in this kind of conversation about whether or not we will send our children back to school or not. After a full summer, normally we are raring to get our children back into the educational process and get them engaged in learning and development. But because of COVID-19, it has complicated that decision. We're going to be talking with Rodney Jones, who is a leader in the Pensacola area, former president of the NAACP, regional director for the NAACP as well. And so we're going to talk with him as well as none other than Dr. Edler, Laura Edler. She is the representative for District 3. And we want to engage them in this conversation. And lastly, but certainly not least, we want to bring on Federick Ingram, who's the president of the Florida Education Association. He'll be calling in a little later on as well. Hopefully he's on, but we're gonna make sure that we get him on and in as quickly as possible. Let's begin this conversation. Dr. Edler, let me ask you a question because this is something that the board is going to have to make a decision about, and that's whether or not we will send our children back to school, and under what conditions will we send our children back to school. As you see it from your perspective, what conditions will make you feel comfortable that our children first are safe, the teachers are safe, and that we can safely send our children back to their homes where they do not infect their homes and community? Dr. Edler, I think you're on mute.
He's on mute.
Okay, let me unmute you.
To do that on a phone.
Okay, I got you. Go
He
ahead.
just unmuted me. Okay.
Yes.
The district, I believe, have done a fantastic job in terms of putting together a plan. That plan, in my opinion, has been very flexible and with options for parents. For the past 2 days in our board meetings, we have discussed it. We have made several compromises. At once, we were going to go back to school August the 10th. That has been extended. We had representatives of teachers and different other community organizations at the board meeting. We listened to them, and they were pleased with the changes that we have made to that plan. And so we have told the public that we will be making adjustments as we need to make them, because day to day, the aspect of this virus change. And so we want to be flexible. But I do believe that giving teachers, parents option as to whether or not you want to get back into the brick and mortar, because there's been a mandate from the governor, and also a virtual, and they're not calling it online, but they have like 3 choices. And parents have an opportunity to make an original choice, but also to come back and to change their mind about it. And so with the work that has been done.
Are there any consequences for making the virtual choice versus making the in-school choice? There's no adverse consequence. Okay, go ahead.
No. And I believe that right now it is a good plan. So I'm okay with it. We voted on it last night, and the teachers union that was there approved of that also.
So let me ask you this. What was the criteria? Are you going by politicians or pediatricians or public health people? Who's driving this?
We're looking we had Dr. Lanza from the health department. He came and he spoke, and he also was pleased with the plan. There were a couple of parents in the audience that were pediatricians, and they basically agreed with the plan.
Okay, so the plan is to delay for a couple of weeks and see what happens.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you're still
And to
going to start.
provide
You're just going to
additional
start
training.
virtual. You're going to start virtual, right? Or is that the
Right. What?
delay total?
That's the delay
Delay
total.
total.
Okay, so
Yes.
we're delaying total an additional 2 weeks to kind of see what happens, and then
And to
after that,
provide additional training for
okay,
teachers.
right. Okay, now what happens with the because if we're talking about virtual, then that means that students will have to have computers and
Right.
internet access. What provisions are being made on the part of the school district to make sure that that takes place?
Yeah. Most of our students have Chromebooks already, and they're Chromebooks that are available to them. If they don't have the internet, there is a flash drive with a hotspot on it in order for them to be able to pull up the assignments. And so that's a part of the plan, and what they've tried to do is to cover all aspects. I'm not sure how it's going to work. They're not sure, and that's why the plan is really very flexible. We have what we call frequently asked questions on the website. That's being updated because as other questions come in, we want to be able to provide those answers to the parents.
Okay.
We are encouraging them to call the superintendent, to call the board members. It just right at the current time, it seems like a workable plan with flexibility.
You know, I want to bring forth President of the Florida Education Association, Federick Ingram, on. How are you doing, my man?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Good. We have Dr. Laura Edler, who is a school board member for Pensacola, and we have none other than Rodney Jones, who is an NAACP representative on as well. But what we want to do is let's figure out what's the best way to get our children either in school or keep them safe out of school and still at the same time provide some learning opportunities.
Sure. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I just want. One is I want to know where do you all stand, the Florida Education Association? Where do you stand now? And then what will make you feel comfortable that we can re-engage our children in the education process in a physical way?
Sure. Well, teachers want to go back to work. We are ready to teach. We are ready to do whatever it takes to get these kids back in school, but we want to do that safely. And there are some things that we have to have in place before we can actually ensure their safety. Not only the teacher's safety, but the kids' safety with this virus and what's going on and the impact on Black and brown children across this state and across this nation. We don't think that our governor nor Commissioner of Education has paid enough attention to the amount of funding that it's going to take to re-engineer our schools. Our schools were made for social social interaction, not social distancing, and so that's going to be a complete change for all of us. Everything from plexiglass to buses. If we have to social distance on buses, you may go on a school bus that is 25% or 50% capacity. That means you have to do some things to. You may have to add bus drivers. You may have to add bus routes, or you may have to add buses completely. And so we don't think that our state government has paid enough attention to the amount of funds that need to go in the coffers of our school board members' hands, our superintendent's hands, and we believe all those decisions are going to be local, and every single community is going to be different because the virus is affecting these communities differently. But when we have a 13.4% positivity rate, that means that we need to do something ensure that these kids are there. We need to ensure that our teachers have PPE, that personal protective equipment. If face shields are going to be, implemented, or masks going to be implemented, how are we going to pay for that? What happens to a teacher when they get this virus and they have to go out for 14 days? Are they at risk of losing their jobs? How do we get a substitute teacher in for those particular instances? Those are going to be some things that we need to talk about. Distance learning is obviously something we need to talk about because we have connectivity issues, we have hardware issues, We know that we went into pandemic pedagogy and crisis management in March. And so have we really developed enough as a state to actually do distance learning in the way that we know it should be? Teachers can do that with the right professional development. We need a phase-in approach to this. And so, we have not heard that from our state government. And we know that our local school boards and our local...
What I want to do, you faded out for a second. Come on back and continue what you're saying, and I got a couple of questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, I'll end there, and hopefully we can elaborate and have a conversation. Whatever you want.
Everything that you say, I agree with, but it would appear that somebody would be sitting down at the table with you guys, kind of working all of these details out, and that it would not be in isolation. Look like leadership would be in place along with, pediatricians and public health professionals, structural engineers to look at how we can do this structurally, finance people. It would appear that everybody would be at the table, and then to make sure that all of these provisions were in place before you decided to open or not open. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. We have asked this governor to come to the table since school was out. The executive order to close schools was issued March 13th. We immediately went on a reopen schools tour to figure out exactly what people wanted and how we could get back in schools. We haven't heard from the governor, and us filing a lawsuit this week is only a reaction to what you just said. There is no collaboration, there is no teamwork, and there is no confidence that we are actually moving in the way. You can't give us a slogan and say schools must be open without giving us a comprehensive plan behind that slogan. It's easy to say everybody wants their kids back in school. Parents, of course, they want their kids back in school, and they should want them back in school. Teachers should want schools open, and they should want to go back to work. But we have something out there right now that is killing people. And we are in Florida at the epicenter of what's going on. The case rate that we have in Florida is exponentially higher than anywhere else in this country, and in fact in the world. And so our positivity rate is up way too high. We don't know what the connectors are between those children and adults. Yes, they're telling us that they don't get, children don't get as sick. But what happens to grandmother when it go home and hugs grandmother, or a sibling that might be sick? We've got to answer those questions for these families before we start putting these kids back in these schools and potentially have super spreader events.
Right. You mentioned something that was very salient. You say that the African American community is disproportionately impacted based on comorbidities and other things. And that needs to be taken into consideration, particularly because many of the school system children come from people who are classified as minority or non-white.
Yes. So we know that children who can't quarantine at home, children who don't have places to isolate themselves, or their parents can't isolate themselves if they come in contact with someone. These are the reasons why, you mentioned the underlying issues of pre-existing conditions. Yes, our children have asthma, they have pre-diabetes, and many have juvenile diabetes, all kinds of bronchial issues. The virus attacks those things. And so when you don't have the proper health care, when you don't get the proper treatments, or, have regular routines where something is wrong, then this virus can exponentially hurt communities, and disproportionately they hurt Black communities. And so that's unfortunate, but that's what we have to look out for. Because once you put those kids back into school, get them around each other, there's a big question mark as to what's going to happen with these kids. And that question mark is leaning on the side of negative impacts more than positive impacts. We got to keep these kids alive. We got to keep them healthy in the best way we know how. And that is right now to keep them as separate as possible until we come up with a plan.
Are we at an impasse, Mr. Ingram, right now with the leadership and the Educational Association? Are you at an impasse now? What's the prognosis of your negotiation?
So here's what we would like to do: implement a practical plan. Practical plan meaning, listen, if we need to open these schools, let's start figuring out a way to do it. We have an idea that we want to share, and we've been talking about this everywhere. For the first 30 days of school, bring back the teachers. Bring back the teachers so that we can figure out how to teach these kids in this new environment. This is going to be a new normal. If we have to teach with face masks, that's going to be a different normal. We have to educate parents on how to wear masks because they don't know how. And we have to re-engineer our kids who are in first grade and second grade and tell them that these masks are not toys. So we can do that, and then let's implement a phase-in approach. A phase-in approach means we may not have kids back in school 5 days a week. We may have them back in school 2 days a week, or 3 days a week, or every other day. How are we going to ventilate these schools? How are we going to clean the schools? Those kinds of things we have to kind of figure out. Let's give ourselves some time to do that and phase in our physical schools again. As you notice, the sports programs are starting to cancel because they cannot figure a way to keep kids safe. And so in our band classes, when you have aerosol droplets in there, how are we going to keep those safe? Are we going to have chorus outside? Because we don't know. We don't know because we're getting no guidance. And our school districts are forced into a situation where they're making it up as we go. And they're doing the very best they can. And
go ahead.
It's not an indictment on the local. Yeah, it's not an indictment on the community because they're doing the best they can. But we're not getting any guidance from our federal government, Betsy DeVos, from our commissioner of education. We're just being told, hey, go do it. And that's not fair to anybody because they know it's going to cost us money and they know that these school districts don't have it.
Yes.
You know, there's one thing that you said, Mr. Ingram, is this. You said that many of the school districts are having to make decisions independently based on their condition. But when they don't have the expertise and wherewithal to even know how to do that, isn't that unfair to put that on them as well?
It is. We are putting a burden on our school board members and our school districts and our unions, unlike anything that we've ever seen before. It's the hardest job in America right now because all eyes will be on Florida in about 2 weeks when those kids, August 10th, start going back to school in our earliest school districts. You know, some people go back August 10th, 17th, 21st, 28th. But in 2 weeks, we will be at the eyes of the world. And it's going to be a big experiment. So if we're going to experiment with our kids, let's at least try to dot every I. Let's cross every T because one life lost is one too many.
Right. Right. We have Dr. Edler on as well. Dr. Edler, Mr. Ingram has made a lot of salient points. You all just made a decision to jump in here and talk to Mr. Ingram about what you all did last night and how you see it.
Right, and we've considered all of those aspects that he's discussing, and he's absolutely right. Those are the same kinds of things that parents and teachers in this district also want. We have purchased masks, different types of masks, the shields for elementary school teachers to wear because they realize the importance of little children actually being able to see people. And so they're going to distribute masks free to the staff. They also have looked at all of the classrooms that don't have sinks in them and how to put sinks in them. They replace water fountains. They're putting in cleaning supplies in every classroom. The custodian people have been trained. They brought in all kinds of machines to show us how they're going to sterilize those rooms frequently and daily. And so all of the things that he talked about, I believe that we have considered those and put them in the plan, and we're hopeful that they're going to work, but we're going to be monitoring them. They're also going to be taking temperatures. They have hired more nurses in the schools. And that's why I'm saying right now I'm okay with the plan that we have in place. Certainly we will monitor to see where changes need to be made, make those changes immediately. One of the concerns here was for parents wanting masks to be mandatory. We looked at the consequences of making masks mandatory and basically change the word of mandatory to required. We are requiring them. We know that children are not going to keep those masks on all day, every day. we're looking at children with compromised, and teachers and staff with compromising conditions that may not be able to wear those masks, and what we're going to do about that. So I'm pretty comfortable now with the decisions that we have made, knowing that we're going to be monitored and making changes as we need to.
You know, let me bring back in Mr. Ingram. What kind of testing are made, provisions are going to be made for not only teachers but also students, if any?
So again, that's a district level decision right now. We have no state guidance on testing, tracking, and tracing, and we need to figure out what an emergency plan is for situations where a student or an adult who is in a school who has an outbreak. Do we quarantine that classroom? Do we quarantine a wing of the school or feeder pattern, whatever it is? And unfortunately, again, we're not getting the state guidance, but our school board members, as the school board member said, are making those decisions on a local level. I just wish that we had a more robust plan as a state to say, here's what what we can help with. Not tell you how to do it, but at least give you some guardrails. Give us a box with some parameters to say, listen, testing, tracking, and tracing has to be done, once a month or once a week. And so we have none of those guidelines. And again, that's going to cost money. It's going to cost the school district, and God bless the school board member who's doing the very best they can. But at some point, they will have a shortfall of money, because this is going to, go deep into the coffers of every school board, every school district that we have, because this is unintended money that's going to go out, and the state hasn't given any more money except for the CARES Act. And so we're pushing really hard for the HEROES Act in Congress, and we're hoping that passes so that even more money can kind of usher into our school districts.
And all districts are not created equal in terms of their economic ability to take this new expense on. And so I don't know what's going to happen when it comes to smaller, less financed communities. That's another issue that must be addressed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really worried about, places like Gaston and Hamilton and Walton, all of these folks in the Panhandle here have really small districts. But listen, some of our school districts, obviously, as the school board member mentioned, they have budgeted well, and they have done what they needed to do with their dollars, and they're directing those dollars in the right places. It sounds like everything is on board to actually have a successful opening, and we wish everybody well. We just want more support from our state government, to ensure as much as we possibly can the health and safety of everybody involved in our public schools.
Now, Rodney, you have children. I mean, how comfortable are you to have your child go to school now, based on what you're hearing?
I'm not comfortable at all. In fact, I chose the remote learning. That's one of the components that Dr. Edler was referring to. You got the virtual, you got the remote, and you got the in-class. Because I don't think there are enough measures taken to safeguard our children. Because it's just the sheer number of children that are entering each individual school. I managed about 50 kids for this summer. I had to purchase all of my masks. Every day, I have to give out new masks, and I'm talking about to the same kids. So one, it's going to be it's definitely going to be costly. Two, I have to manage those kids every day to ensure they keep their masks on. Three, I have to have an individual every day that's ready and available to do monitoring of temperatures and all of that. So my thought was, how do you, even though you hire a couple of new nurses, are they going to be on the bus ramp? When each kid gets off of the bus, are they going to monitor the temperature? Because ain't no sense in monitoring it once they get in classroom, once they cough, once you see them sniffling, it's already too late. Because the range of the infection is going to cover the circumference of the classroom. And then three, you gotta understand, last week, our transportation, Escambia County Public Schools transportation director was on WEAR. She said they're not going to mandate kids getting on the bus with masks, and they're going to operate at full capacity. So that's at least 2 kids per seat. And they're not going to mandate. I know Dr. Edler say they were going to require them. That was in school, but I'm speaking of what the director said specifically last week to our public, that they were not going to mandate and the buses are going to operate at full capacity. So no, I'm not comfortable with sending my kids there. So therefore I've set up an operation at my site so my kids can do remote learning. Not too sure on how that's going to work out, because in our virtual classrooms from March to the end of the school term this year, it didn't work out too well, where our kids had to go into this virtual class and pull out their assignments and do their assignments, which made me have to monitor them more so than often when you got them going to school face to face, and they had the ability to get help and information from the teacher. At home, it's a difference. If they choose to do virtual, that means you're kind of allowing that child to operate on their own. With this remote, again, as Mr. Ingram said, we might have issues with technology. There may be blackouts, there may be poor remotes and all of this, and then internet capability. I know Dr. Edler said they're giving out hotspots, but when you're talking about virtual, where kids have to virtually operate on their own, and then remote, you're dealing with kids who are being taught from hopefully the classroom setting, if they have all of these set up. I don't even know that. So I'm looking at a quadruple amount of resources that's going to have to come into the school to actually make it operational or safe for students to come in this year. Otherwise, we're moving too fast.
Mr. Ingram, are there going to be cameras in the classrooms that children can monitor, or is it going to be some separate training modality for people who choose to be?
If every school district is handling that differently, we certainly have our issues with cameras in classrooms, and so we are monitoring that as a state. There's been no state guidelines to say, but we're doing something. Some districts are adapting something called synchronous learning or synchronous teaching, where you can have students at home to watch the teacher in class and watch the classroom atmosphere. But we certainly have not negotiated that in many of our districts, but they are looking very closely at that. It's really a collegiate model that is being adopted to pre-K-12, and so we're going to try to do that as much as we possibly can. But I think your parent, the gentleman who just spoke, brought up a lot of salient points that, listen, this is a scary time for us. We cannot be reckless with this. Our state opened. We opened up way too fast, in my opinion. That's my personal opinion. I have a 15-year-old who's going to 9th grade. She's a superstar athlete, volleyball player. She's probably not going to have a volleyball season and probably not going to enjoy a brick and mortar in-person class at all, because I'm just not, I'm not secure that our schools are going to be safe. And listen, they're doing everything that they possibly can, but without the proper reinforcements, without the proper professional development and education for people to do all the small things, keeping on a mask, keeping up with a mask, face shields, hand washing stations. How often do we have kids implement something? So, and are our schools equipped to have 200 kids washing their hands at the same time? They're not. Do we have enough sanitation in the schools? Are we going, they're notorious, some of our schools, for not having some of the supplies that we need. Teachers buy supplies. They ask parents, on the list there's always Kleenex. There's always paper towels, simply because some of our schools just don't have, or they run out. These are the kinds of things that we're talking about, the very practical things that I don't think we're yet prepared for. And I don't want us to rush into this, because some of these kids will die. And that is not a scare tactic. This virus is serious.
Right. I think that when we look at it from the vantage point of truly understanding that much of what is happening is unknown, we don't know about it. And Dr. Edler, I'm concerned that sometimes we act like, or not you, but we seem like we got everything together when there are a lot of variables. One is just cleaning your hands does not address the aerosol condition
Right.
by which if a child sneezes and it gets in the atmosphere and you're not well ventilated, many of those classrooms are not well ventilated, then you can literally infect the entire classroom within a day's time because of the length of time that they're together. Is that not true?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I understand the challenges and that there's so many unknown. And if you recall, I said I'm comfortable right now. Now, later on this afternoon or tomorrow, I may not be. But right now, it seems that we're looking at all of the aspects, but there's so many things unknown. But the parents here are expressing the same kinds of concern. We had parents to stand up last night and say, "I'm scared to death that I could die." And so with all of the things that we're put in place, they still are not that comfortable, but they want to teach. They want to go back to the children, and they're willing to try what we have in place right now with the understanding that you can tell us and keep us informed as to what your needs are and how things are going. But I do believe that if we all begin to work together, that we can make some stride. It does not mean that we've got all of the answers, but we got to begin somewhere. And if that beginning is not to go back to school, then that's the beginning. But it is difficult, in my opinion, to make that decision when you have a mandate from the governor to say that the brick and mortar schools need to open up. And like the president said, without any guidance, without any money, and that people are doing the best that they can, and that's all that I'm saying here in this district, is that these people have worked awfully hard to put something in the place to the best of their ability. And we still want input from parents and from teachers and from everybody to say, this isn't working, try this. And certainly we would take a look at it and consider it. But these are difficult times for everybody, not just in Florida, but in the world. And so I do understand that sometimes these things are not going to work. And when I talked about that we bought the mask for people, that they can get all of the masks, the superintendent said, and if you run out, let us know. We're going to try to find the money to put more in. I believe that's the only reassurance at this time that we can provide.
Dr. Edler, is this mask shields or masks? Because masks can...
They got all types.
Okay.
And they have all types. And that was one of the questions that I asked. Do the parents, do the teachers get a choice, or do you just have a package of masks that you're going to give people? No, they have a choice.
All right. Let me bring on another caller. 8483, you got the power. What's your comment?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on air.
Yes. I'm listening and enjoying the conversation. I just want to say to the listening audience, this virus is real. I have 2 family members who have died in the last 48 hours of the virus. I think to put children on the school bus is ridiculous because there's no way they're going to ensure those children do not contract it from another student, take it to the different homes. I see these school buses, and they are packed even before the pandemic. Dr. Edler, God bless you. Thank you for speaking up for these children and bringing some saneness to this school board. But I want to see people use their Chrome tablets, at least for the next 90 days, where we'll just see where we're going with it.
Hold on a second, caller. I want to bring on Mr. Ingram. Mr. Ingram, notice we got all these parents, and you got a caller right now that said that his family just died. That's a lot of anxiety. What about the mental health of our children? Have we addressed that?
So it's tough during these times. And what I will say is this. You know, there are parents who are worried about the academics. There are parents who are worried about the mental. What we're saying to parents is do the very best you can to keep your kids alive, healthy, and safe. When we can get them back in brick and mortar schools, our teachers are the best in the business. They will do what's necessary to get them where they need to go. And don't feel like your kid is going so far behind. Because listen, at the end of the day, last year on March 13th, when they declared schools closed and we went to distance learning, remember what that window was. That's the testing window in the state of Florida. So, a lot of our kids would have been in a testing mode where they would have been sitting, taking a battery of tests, a regiments of state tests like the FSA and others. And then they had the normal outside of class, which is the summer. And so, if we have to move in slowly this year, our kids won't miss that much. Do the very best you can at home. Make sure that these kids are talking to you. You're having those conversations. Make sure that you're keeping them safe as much as you possibly can, feeding them well. And when they get back in school, it's either through distance learning or through brick and mortar. And as soon as we can get back into school together, and we will, because we're going to have a vaccine for this, and we're going to have all these protocols in place, and people are going to add the money. I'm the eternal optimist that we're going to make this thing happen. But right now, today, it's just not a safe place. And let's keep our kids alive. Let's keep our kids healthy, and let's keep them sane by talking to them and having those educational conversations with them as parents.
Mr. Ingram, you said something that's important. A lot of our children go to school not just to learn, but also to eat. So what provisions are we going to make for those children who are in homes that do not provide the requisite, for food that they need to survive? Have we taken that into consideration?
So maybe your school board member can tell you what happened in her school district, but what I know across the state is that our schools went into super mode, and they started to feed kids in challenged areas. There were all kinds of things that were set up so that the nutrition that we were offering at school sites was in different communities, on buses.
Right.
Where they could come into school districts. I don't want to speak for any school district, but I know that our educational support professionals, cafeteria workers, and bus drivers, they never stop feeding kids. And so we have a high expectation that our public schools will still be those vessels of hope where we can get those hot meals to families and to kids, and we'll still continue to do that under the circumstances and do the very best we can. But again, the brick and mortar option is just simply, not viable at the moment. But school board members, you want to add? I'm sure you guys did some Herculean things in your school district.
Absolutely, we did. And one of the things that we're going to do this year is if a parent has a child that's enrolled in several different schools, is to make sure that they can do one pickup for all of those children rather than to go from school to school to pick up a meal. So that's a part of our plan. But certainly during the summer and when we first got into this, that the feeding of the children continued. Even the library here was involved in being a spot for the meals. And so we have not left that out either.
So let me ask this. We have a situation that was brought up by Mr. Bennett, who said that who's going to check the children before they get on the bus and who's going to check the children after they get on the bus. Is there been some provision to make sure that temperature checks, like when you walk in certain buildings, and all of that is being done on a daily basis, on a regular basis, to make sure that we try to be proactive when children are moving from place to place? I want to ask you that, Dr. Edler.
Well, we discussed the bus. We had a bus driver at the meeting, and because they're stopped on the streets, we're looking at whether or not you can tie up the traffic to check every child. But I do want to say that we have looked at the capacities on the bus, and I don't know where that's coming from, full capacity, because we're looking at how to distancing children, and that we may have to have dual routes in those areas. And so we're not looking at packing buses. Right now, we're like every other district. We need bus drivers in order to maintain our regular routes. And so we're looking at how to better serve the children. That was one of the reasons that we had a survey out there to determine potentially how many parents wanted to send their children back to school, so that we could look at what a classroom would look like, how many children we can put in there, how many children we can put on a bus. And so all of those things that we've been considering, because we don't want to pack a bus with a lot of people. That's not safe for the driver. That's not safe for the children, and we cannot expect children to stay seated in the seat that they sat on when they first came on the bus.
Well,
And
I
so
said
that's
that,
still a
Doctor.
excuse me?
No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
No,
Dr.
I'm good.
Bring you on, Rodney. Go ahead.
Yeah, I said that, but if you check the newsreel, WEAR, the Escambia
Yeah.
County Schools Transit Director said that. She said they
Right.
would not mandate masks, nor would they operate at a capacity less than the maximum capacity that they usually operate at. She said
Absolutely.
that on a
Yeah.
newsreel. So that's where
Yeah.
it came from.
Absolutely, and I'm not saying that she did not say that. I'm saying that even the mandatory masks now, it was always our expectation for children to wear them. When we look at the adolescents today, especially those of color, they are being disciplined for everything that they do. And usually when you tell these young people you got to do something, then that's when you're going to get that oppositional defiance. So we looked at discipline and mandatory together. How do we mandate somebody to wear something without punishing them? And that's why we looked at the language, and rather than to put mandate, we said that masks are required. And so when you look at that and you're looking at words, that's basically saying the same thing, that we want children to wear masks, but we're looking at special circumstances. There are some people, because they have compromised condition, cannot keep on a mask, even teachers and staff. And so we're looking at exceptions to the rules. And so I know we're not going to pack buses. We're not going to even pack classrooms.
So I have a question.
Go. Let me do this. Let me bring on 37. Let me bring on somebody else. 3776. You got the power. What's your comment?
I'm curious.
Go ahead. 37.
Hello?
You on the air. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say them. I just wouldn't take a chance with my children being sent to school right now. And I know I heard last night that they were saying that the governor that was saying that, I know Malcolm Thomas said this, that the teachers would not get paid if they didn't start the school in August on time. Is that true, Dr. Edler?
That was the reason for the August the 10th, is to prevent people from not being paid. And when they extended the time, teachers will come back on the 17th rather than the 10th, and children will come back on the 24th. And it was to consider them not being penalized by losing pay. And so after looking at how to build in and guarantee them that they would get their check, that's when the decision was made that we could go ahead and move it back for a while. But they will get paid. The bus drivers who are on hourly wages may not get paid on the upfront end, but will get that money on the back end. And so all of the monies will come to them. It may not come at the time that it was supposed to, but that was one of the areas that we looked at, is not to penalize them without giving the money.
Mr. Ingram, part of the problem is that a lot of people will have to go to work because they can't afford not to. And particularly with when you have your industry or whatever it is become available to work, even unemployment is not available to you. What provisions are you making for people who feel they cannot, in their own consciousness, go into work with conditions of such? Teachers, I'm talking about teachers and other school personnel.
Right. We're fighting really hard for reasonable accommodations, and reasonable accommodations will come in many different forms. There are going to be some of our teachers that are over the age of 60 that won't be ready for retirement, that will look to retire simply because they may have underlying issues. Their age may make them vulnerable. There may be pregnant teachers who can't go into schools. And so what we're asking our state government is to consider what we call reasonable accommodations. Now, they have given these reasonable accommodations to some of our frontline workers and, police officers and firefighters who are going into, these emergency situations.
I'm sorry.
Hold up. If you're on, you can't talk because you're not on mute. So everybody needs to be quiet or mute yourself if you're on. Okay. Go ahead.
Right. And so the last part of reasonable accommodations really is if you contract this virus or if you are in the presence of somebody, it forces you to a 14-day quarantine. Well, what happens to that teacher? We don't want that teacher to lose pay. We want them to, have all of their benefits guaranteed to them. And so we're trying to work on that from a state level. A lot of that is district and union negotiations. And so we're trying to help, give information to the district so that we can kind of move forward and make everybody whole one way or the other.
What kind of collaboration or coordination among school districts are taking place? I would assume that by you being the Education Association, that you really are the advocate for the teachers and personnel. What kind of coordination and communication is taking place amongst you guys?
In the normal course of things, you have bargaining, you have negotiations. Some issues require impact bargaining, where if there's something that comes up and you have to get to the table right away, the superintendent / school board will go to the table with the union to try and work certain things out. And again, every single district is taking a slightly different road and trying to get to the same goal. So for me to tell you about one district, Miami-Dade will be very different from Escambia, or Escambia will be very different from Union or Volusia, or wherever it is. And so there are all kinds of ideas that people are coming up with to try and do what's best for their community and their local. And so we respect all of that. What we simply want is our governor to give more money to these school districts so that they have more room to work. They have more latitude to make right decisions. There's no silver bullet to this. We're not going to solve this. We don't have a vaccine in our district, but we can do so many things if we actually had the money or a plan or some guides, and we have nothing from this governor. Our school board members, our districts, our superintendents, our unions have been left to their own devices. Come up with it, but you must have brick and mortar options. That's not fair. That's not fair to our kids, our communities, our families, and those people who are in the elected office. And what you're doing is shifting the blame. And we need to hold this governor accountable, because look at the virus and as it relates to the rest of the nation. And how did Florida get here? People need to understand we can be reckless with bars and restaurants and beaches, but you can't be reckless with these public schools.
Well, you shouldn't be reckless with anything, Mr. Ingram, but obviously I get your point. Let me ask you this. What's the essence of the lawsuit, and what's the timeline by which you expect some resolution?
So we filed for a 10-day injunction. We're hoping that the judge grants us the injunction. Our injunction really is to throw out the emergency order, which forces schools into the brick and mortar option. And so if we get that thrown out, then again, that gives our school districts a little bit more parameters to be creative in terms of hybrid models, virtual school, online learning, but it does not require that you have a brick and mortar option until that school district deems it necessary. And so we believe that it's unconstitutional to do that because our Constitution says that it is the government's responsibility to have a uniform, safe, and secure public education. And so we don't believe that the safety nor security of our students is going to be valid given the circumstances around this virus. And so we believe that the emergency order is unconstitutional.
All right, Mr. Jones, I want to bring you in on this thing because you are a parent, but you're also a community leader. So I want to ask you, what is the community involvement, and what level do you feel that are you being heard as a community leader? What level of communication and community input is prevalent now, particularly in Pensacola area?
I think the open communication or input was voiced mostly at the school board meeting that we had. But I think the plan was already in place prior to that, and they were simply listening to the voices. As far as the community goes, there's so much miscommunication within the community outside of that many people don't have real direction, especially when you're talking about communicating to people who are at a lower socioeconomic status, who live in particular geographic locations throughout this city, whom are going to be the greatest majority of individuals who are impacted because of this, because most of them are going to have to be brick and mortar. They're going to have to go to school because they ain't going to be able to make the accommodations, or the parents are not going to be able to monitor those kids to the degree that they are getting adequate academic teaching. And so the communication is not really out there. As far as some of the agencies, all of us have, can you hear me?
Yeah,
can you hear me?
You were breaking up for a second. Go ahead, continue.
Okay. Many of the organizations out here, I know Movement for Change, whom I'm an executive board member of, that has been the forefront of our conversation in regard of that, in regards to getting information out to our community, best methods, best practices, and the returning to school. In our opinion, it'll be very, very difficult to be able to safeguard them. So that's the communication I put out on my show every week. Anytime we're in conversation through our Voices Are Many, or our community conversation, virtual broadcasts that we do every week, that's the communication that we're putting out, or information we're putting out to our community. It is difficult and for the parents who don't have the ability to be able to have a mask every day for their child before they get on the bus, and then to send them to school in an environment that I do not believe that they're going to be able to safeguard them. I don't see them having the capacity to be able to social distance. I don't see them having the adequate drivers, like the lady said on WEAR. They're going to pick kids up. I don't think they have the drivers to break it down. And if they do, why isn't information being disseminated to the community to say, okay, your kids are going to be picked up 2 hours later at the bus stop, at the same bus stop, so that we can practice social distancing? It's been a lot of miscommunication and poor communication.
Let me, Mr. Ingram, I so appreciate you and your leadership. I've watched you on many of the major networks, and your stellar just clarity of thought, man, just resonated with me. So thank you for that. I think it's going to be important that we do provide as much guidance and support to these local districts as possible. Because I was just thinking about what Mr. Jones was just saying, is that there are a lot of poor people who are going to have to send their children to school because they don't have options. Many of them are working in these places where they don't have supervision or child care, so they're going to be forced by virtue of their circumstance to send their children to the brick and mortar option. Have we taken those things into consideration?
So we have. Again, this is not a perfect situation. We know that our families of color are those frontline workers, those grocery store workers,
right?
Those people who have these everyday 9-to-5 jobs, and they have to go to work, or the rent doesn't get paid, or food is not on the table. These are not perfect circumstances, and so we're going to have to really be creative as a community. I think you just had an advocate on the phone. These folks who are activists in our communities, we've got to put pressure on some of our local elected our local officials to do more for these communities and these empowerment zones, so that we can deal with, these food deserts, and really it's going to take clarity of thought for our state and federal governments, because we need those moratoriums on rents and mortgages, because we're not out of the woods. And Florida has not gone forward with this virus. We've gone backwards. It's gotten worse. It's gotten exponentially worse. And I think the one thing that I agree with the president for the last 3.5 years, I saw an interview yesterday that said this virus is going to get worse before it gets better.
And particularly when it comes into the flu season in November, it's going to be really
Absolutely.
that's a whole nother conversation. What we're going to do is I want to invite you in advance to come back on the show. We do both Zoom, Facebook Live, as well as radio. You're not just on radio. Well, we'd love to have you back on the show, Mr. Federick Ingram, who is the president of the Florida Education Association. Thank you for on this segment of You Got the Power, man. I really do appreciate your being a part of.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to thank and extend, my heartfelt thanks to the school board member who is on this show. You guys have an unthankful job right now.
Absolutely.
So keep on keeping on and keep doing your job. Know that, we are with you, and sometimes unions get a bad rap, but man, I'm a high school band director. And if you know anything about teachers and high school band directors, we give our life, blood, and soul to these kids. And that's all I want. I'm a poor black kid from Miami who got an education at a public school. And that's what helped me through life. That and faith in God and everything else. And I think we can kind of keep moving. So to the parents that you had on today, Godspeed to all of you. Make the right decisions for your child. Don't let anybody force anything on you. You do what's best for you. Health and safety first. Academics, unfortunately, academics come second right now, because it's about the health and safety and well-being of your child. And let's get that under control. Let's get this virus under control and call your governor and put the pressure on him to get some money into these districts. Thank you so much for having me. You got the power.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right. Well, the clock on the wall says it's time for us to get up here. Dr. Edler, thank you so much. I always love to have you on the show. Your clarity of thought, again, always so clear. Thank you so much for your willingness always to be a part of the You Got the Power show. I appreciate you so very much. And we're going to continue this conversation. I want people to understand that they need to be engaged. They need to be talking to you. You need to hear what they think. This is not a time to shrink or to become invisible. This is the time to be proactive and engaged in the conversation. So I do appreciate your willingness to hear the people as well, Dr. Edler.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Reverend, Dr. Reverend. I call you everything because you're my dear friend and my mentee.
Yes, sir.
I do appreciate you and all of the work that you are doing. So appreciate you, and you keep up the good work that you're doing in your advocacy. You have always been an advocate for the people, man, a strong advocate. And thank God that whatever day you were born, that day came. And for the work that you're doing. Thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you, sir.
All right. Well, the clock on the wall says it's time for us to get you up out of here. We got our T-shirts back, and we got our hats for the You Got the Power. So they're going to be made available for sale soon, like tomorrow. And so you can, for people on Facebook Live, you can inbox me and you can order your T-shirts and your hats. We only do them every 5 years, so we don't just put them out regularly. So this is kind of a special edition. We got the one that says strong minds break strong chains. And so this is a really powerful T-shirt. Got the power. That's what it's about. Strong minds break strong chains. So pick up your You Got the Power T-shirt, and let's make this thing happen. Well, as always, I'd like to thank you for joining with us on this segment of You Got the Power. Don't forget to support this program by sending your checks and money orders in care of You Got the Power at P.O. Box 146, Tuskegee, Alabama, 36087. That's P.O. Box 146, Tuskegee, Alabama, 36087. Also, you can support us on Facebook by supporting us through PayPal as well as Cash App. As always, I'd like to leave you with these two words. Remember that I love you with a perfect love. But more importantly, remember this. You got the power. We'll see you next week, same time, same station. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.